Appreciate the opportunity. We'll just do a quick update. Dr. Kristen Obings back here, and she's the Associate Director, so if you have questions, you can grab one of us. Unfortunately, after this meeting gets done, I have to get back up to Boone, about 45 minutes away, because I've got kids involved in some activities tonight, so I'm not going to be able to stick around here and actually have to, I milk livestock as well, so I got to get in the barn and get that done before I get to kids' activities. So, but our goal here is fairly quickly to give you an update on NIAA, which is the National Institute for Antimicrobial Resistance Research and Education. This will be a fairly high-level interview. Feel free to ask me questions or stop me if you do. We'll talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, and the early part of how to get involved. So the story of NIAA is a bit long and drawn out, and so I'll try and condense that down a bit. Really, this process started back in 2015 by two concurrent activities that were going on. One of those was the American Association of Veterinary Medical Colleges and the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, APLU and AAVMC, that were working together to identify how to move antimicrobial resistance understanding, knowledge, and issues forward across land-grant and public universities. So that's not just all the land grants, but that's any of the public universities as well. So the APLU represents about 250 universities here in the U.S. and then across all of the veterinary colleges. And so they developed a task force that address this issue of antibiotic resistance. And the primary outcome of this task force, released back in 2015, was the identification for the need for a virtual institute or a virtual network that would pull together expertise from the academic institutions, industry, across the whole breadth of stakeholders, and really try and best utilize our very limited resources to work together and promote connections, promote safe dialogue, and try and make sure that we weren't duplicating efforts, weren't working against each other in areas where there was synergism to work together. So that report was released in 2015. About the same time, Iowa State started working to identify our core of antimicrobial resistance workers here in Iowa. And so that started as an institution-wide event. We identified about 60 folks, and that sounds like a lot of faculty, but we, and you'll see this a couple of places in these slides, we very much look at this issue as a broad impact. So some of those are vaccinologists working on better vaccines that then alter how we use antibiotics. Some of them are, videographers and artificial intelligence and machine learning folks that take videography of pens of animals and identify individual sick animals, and engineers working with them to say, how do we mark those animals, systematically so that then we can pull them easier. It's sociologists working to better understand science communication and changing prescribing practices and changing the approach that producers perhaps take in making antibiotic decisions. So we started with that process in 2015, pulled together folks on campus that fairly quickly then expanded across Ames to include the USDA ARS, the National Center for Animal Health and National Veterinary Services Lab there in Ames. Before long, the University of Iowa and their medical facility, human medical facility, became involved. And then in 2017, the University of Nebraska system, the whole University of Nebraska system, USDA, folks from the USDA Meat Animal Research Center and the Great Plains Veterinary Education Center, and the University of Nebraska Medical Center joined. And then towards the end of 2017, Mayo Center in Rochester, Minnesota, on the human side, joined the effort. And so we had developed this kind of Midwest, what we called the Midwest Consortium for Antimicrobial Resistance. And so then in April, APLU and AAVMC moved forward with their call for potential host institutions. That network, that Midwest Consortium, put in a proposal to host the institute. We were competitively selected from 9 other institutions, or conglomerates, if you will, consortiums that had applied to host. And since July of 2018, we've been working to really lay the foundation and start to build that process of how do we pull all these stakeholders together and try and work in the space and move things forward. And that's what I'm going to try and provide a bit of context for today. We've identified an interim executive advisory council that's helping to give us some high-level perspectives on that, and I'll share that group here with you in a minute. And then obviously we've hired staff like Dr. Obink. So our vision and mission we're going to talk about briefly here, and I want to backdrop these vision, mission, and strategy with the caveat that in May we're going to be having a meeting where we pull in a number of other academic institutions and some industry advisors to really develop a shared governance and make sure we're on track with consensus around this mission and vision. So these are still a bit in flux. As a leadership team, we're bringing these forward and saying this is where we think we're focused, but we're pulling on those other institutions. So I already told you the consortium that was involved with Nebraska, Iowa State to begin with, and Mayo. And here in May, we'll be having 12 other universities that are sort of a who's who of land grant institutions that are involved in the veterinary ag space that will be coming in and will be joining in this process of developing a shared governance and a shared vision and mission. And so, but our proposed vision at this point is to drive collaborative and integrative research, education, and engagement to solve AMR challenges and benefit society using a One Health approach. And our mission is really, we see it solidifying around this kind of section here to foster an active understanding of antimicrobial resistance to reduce its societal impact. And you can see multiple places through here, we very much see that as a One Health approach. And so that's all about trying to get those, you know, Steve Solomon had that quote, I think, in the video that you played, trying to get the physicians talking to the veterinarians and the producers talking to the consumers and pull everybody in and really try and reduce some of the finger pointing, if you will, and pull people together and say we need to leave the room all feeling like we can do better tomorrow than we did today as it relates to how we use antibiotics prudently and judiciously and promoting the stewardship of those resources. So we've identified some values that underlie everything that we do and that we want to be about. And so you can see those here, certainly ethical, but we want to be transparent. We want to make clear what we're doing. We want to be evidence-based and with that objective. And so, you know, I think this is an area that sometimes we get overly excited about things and sometimes we lose our objectivity. And so certainly we want to stay focused on what does the evidence show us, what does the data show us, have an objective approach, be innovative, be collaborative, get groups to work together, and then really be action-oriented because like many things, this is a space that it's really easy to all get in a room and talk about and then leave there and not have a lot of action come out of that. And so our team is very driven by how do we take this the next step for everything we do. So this is our Interim Executive Advisory Council. Dr. Nusser is our Vice President for Research at Iowa State, and Dr. Boehm is the Vice Chancellor for the Institute of Agricultural and Natural Resources at Nebraska, University of Nebraska. These two folks are up here and representing those institutions because at the present time, all of our funding comes from those two institutions. So AAVMC and APLU developed this idea and plan, but didn't put any money into it. And so these two institutions have both committed over $250,000 each per year for the next 3 years. So our current operating budget's around $500,000 per year for the next 3 years. And during that period of time, and hopefully sooner, we're expected to become financially sustainable on our own model. Probably there's going to be a diversified portfolio there of membership from academic and stakeholder groups, as well as funding from grant funding, and at some point we hope and are starting to lay the foundations for fairly good philanthropic funding as well. So they serve on that team, and then some other folks that you may or may not recognize. So Bernadette Dunham here, George Washington University. She's a lecturer there in One Health, veterinarian from a background. She was the former director of the FDA Center for Veterinary Medicine, and now is serving as a One Health lecturer. Kathy Wotecki, now a consultant, former USDA Undersecretary and Chief Scientist, has strong ties to here in Iowa and food safety background, food science background. Lonnie King, former Dean of Ohio State University, and he's the current co-chair of the Presidential Action Committee for Combating Antimicrobial Resistant Bacteria, PACCARB, and certainly Lonnie was very involved right from the start with AAVMC and APLU and in developing this process. And then Robin Patel, a human infectious disease physician from Mayo Clinic, who's the incoming president for the American Society for Microbiology, serves. And this is an interim executive advisory council because come this fall, we've asked them for a 9-month commitment. Come this fall, this Executive Advisory Council will transition to our new shared governance and be populated by executive advisory representatives that are selected through our shared process. But these folks are helping us stand up the ideas of how do we pull in and engage with stakeholders and develop our institute around that. This is our current staff. As I said, Dr. Obing sitting back here. Valen Bodensteiner is our marketing and communication specialist full-time in our office. Phenomenally good in all things related to that. She comes from a communications and marketing background, has a lot of graphic design experience, and then also actually worked in marketing and communications for an entrepreneurship center at an academic institution. So she actually also brings in a lot of expertise in laying down the foundations of value propositions and business structure and kind of the entrepreneurship aspect of that. And then Erica Helmich was a recruit from the College of Veterinary Medicine at Iowa State. As was Dr. Obing, so I took a bunch of people from vet school and built my team around it, and she brings a wealth of knowledge there. And so this is a team. We've set up our office out in the Iowa State University Research Park, and as you can see in these slides, we have had strong support, even though Iowa State and University of Nebraska are the ones funding this, to unbrand this from those institutions. And so again, our goal is to be collaborative and inclusive and not just be, waving the Iowa State flag or the UNL flag or anything out there, although we're paid by Iowa State and certainly they have a vested interest, but our goal is to brand ourselves as a collaborative institution. And so being out in the research park helps us to do that and gives us a little bit more autonomy than on campus. Our organizational structure, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this other than to say that right now our proposed organizational structure that we're going to start to build some consensus around or non-consensus is based off of a group called the Antibacterial Resistance Leadership Group, the ARLG. And this is an NIH-funded institute. They funded about $70 million every 3 or 4 years. And the whole focus there is getting human physicians to work together to develop a systematic clinical trials network and some resources that can really push the ball further forward and faster than what those institutions doing that independently. And so I think you can appreciate that that has a lot of the same flavor of what we're wanting to do, except that it's entirely human focused and it doesn't cross that One Health spectrum. And so Dr. Patel from Mayo is involved in this group. They have had very good outcomes and are continuously getting more funding. And so they've got an organizational structure that's kind of complex, and we don't need to get into that, but you can see there's an executive committee that provides kind of some of that high-level, overarching 10,000-foot view. There's a steering committee that has the scientific subject matter experts that kind of help drive the steering or the scientific agenda, if you will. A leadership center, some cores that work together to synchronize approaches and act as repositories, and then some focus areas. And so our current potential structure that we're moving forward is modeled off of that. That would have an executive committee with some large, big picture type folks on it, steering committee, some potential industry consortium partnerships that fall out along the sides, some data analysis and study cores that really work hard to make sure we're doing stuff correctly. Economics and social sciences is extremely important to us, and how do we get those involved and learn more from sociology and making these things push them forward, and then some lab cores as well as some focuses down here. So really, we take a broad approach, as I said. We're very interested not just in resistance. This isn't just, microbiologists sitting at a bench doing bacterial resistance work, but it's much broader than that. It relates to antimicrobial use. It relates to antimicrobial stewardship. And our name has AMR, resistance, in it, but our approach is broad. And we've identified 4 primary strategies that we are moving forward in working in. And so those are research, education, collaboration, and advocacy. So in that research field, right now, we see that as helping to build networks, helping to build teams that can address issues that may arise, whether that's an industry need or whether that's a federal grant need or whatever the case may be. Resource mapping, knowing what all these different institutions is happening, what resources they have. Hey, we need a place that can accomplish this project, this goal, this outcome. Can you pull a team together even if they're not all at the same place? Can you pull a sociologist that's really good in this area to work with a microbiologist and then an economist to address an issue? That type of research fostering and development. Education is important to that. That education is part of our name, and so part of that's, educating prescribers, educating producers, educating consumers, but a lot of it too is science communication and how do we really get around this issue of antimicrobial resistance and do a better job of communicating what we're doing in terms of, many times we just want to give data, and that often hits a roadblock. And so how do we do a better job of interacting with the consumer or the retailer or the policymaker or the the appropriator? And so in fact we're considering and looking for opportunities around future antibiotic symposiums from NIAA to really focus on the science communication topic. Collaboration is a part of all we do, and then advocacy has been an area that has been an area that we've been very involved in. So Kristen and I have been involved in quite a bit of work on the Hill and working with ag appropriations here in the last little bit to increase antimicrobial resistance funding, meeting with the ag appropriations committees, legislators, and all of that to really push this forward as an important issue. So with that, we're trying to, and starting the process of building a network of proven expertise, pulling in, mapping resources from all different stakeholders on what they have. We're branded as an inclusive institute, and we're wanting everybody to feel part of that. We're sharing solutions, looking at opportunities to improve our accessibility of data, at least in the research community. How do we share some of our outcomes and capitalize on some of that data better than we currently do? And so with that, I'll answer any questions. You can see our website. I will tell you we're getting ready to launch a new website, hopefully here at the end of the month. So if you go there currently, it does have Iowa State branding on it, because believe it or not, it's really hard to get Iowa State off of websites at Iowa State. But we're doing it. It's just taking a little bit longer. So there's a temporary landing site. This website address will stay the same even after the new website launches here. This is a picture of our office out in the research park. We're right around the corner from many of the folks in the research park, where it's Merck or BI or all those NewLink and all those folks. So we're out there in our stakeholder group, and you can see the info email here, or catch me or Kristen if you have questions. So any questions? That's kind of the big update. We are possibly considering that the fall antibiotic symposium, we might take a little bit of time either before or after the symposium to have folks stick around for half a day or something and give you some more updates and more how do you get involved. So if you're from the industry side of things, we want to get you involved, and the plan is that over this summer and fall we'll be ready to do that.